Hello and welcome to the Entity Framework Community Standup. We have a special edition today, as I think you can see from everybody that we have on the screen here. Since we've just released EF Core 5.0, we're having a celebration today. We will be showing some code later, but we're also going to be chat with all these wonderful pillars of the EF community here. And we're going to talk about some history, as well as look at some of the code. But we'll post links in the show notes for places you can go and find more detail. But let's have some fun today. There may be cake later, but I'm not promising anything. Okay, so let's introduce everybody. So I'm Arthur. I'm the engineering manager on Entity Framework. And more interestingly, we have 4 pillars of the EF community online. So Julie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Julie Lerman. I probably saw Entity Framework maybe before everybody in this call except for Diego in 2006. Anyway,
Wow, yeah.
So I've been, fiddling with and trying to keep up with the pace of Entity Framework as it's evolved for 14 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yep.
Great to have you here, Julie. And we also have John Smith. John?
Hi there. Yeah. Well, Julie wrote this great tome. How thick it is.
Yeah, on my shelf behind me too.
Yeah, back in the day. And I haven't got to that point, but I've got a book. This is the first book, but I'm updating it to EF Core 5. And it's added about 100 pages to the book. And Bryce might like to know that the migration chapter has gone from 32 pages to 41 pages.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. Great to have you here, John. And then we have Erik E. J. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce your full name. Welcome, Erik.
That's fine. Everybody knows me as Erik E. J. So let's stick to that for the sake of everybody. I'm been involved with Entity Framework since I suppose EF5, EF6 times when I was helping maintain the SQL Server Compact provider.
Mm-hmm, I remember that.
And yes, good old days. And then I took over the maintenance of the Entity Framework Power Tools because nobody else really cared. Sorry.
we cared. We just had limited time, and you were so good at it.
Of course. And then I actually also wrote completely from scratch a provider, an EF Core provider for SQL Server Compact. And I started doing that like way too early in the cycle, like doing so many betas. It was so painful, and the product name changed, everything changed, all the namespaces changed. So that was an experience, and my current endeavor in the EF universe is the maintenance of EF Core Power Tools.
Excellent. Yes.
So yeah.
Great to have you here, Erik. And then finally, we have, for our guest, we have Diego. Now, I think everybody remembers Diego used to be a PM on the team, was for many, many years. He's been away from Microsoft for a while, but he's back doing not Entity Framework stuff, but other interesting things. So, Diego, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I was on the team for 12 years. I probably saw EF at the same time that Julie saw it.
Yeah.
I remember watching the Channel 9 videos about EF and giving them some feedback and asking for features and stuff like that. And then I ended up joining the team in 2007. And I was also an engineer manager, not just the PM. But
that's true, yes.
But yes, anyway, I'm happy to be here.
Diego was a big part of Many-to-Many, so it's really good to have him on to talk about Many-to-Many. So we'll get to that a bit later on. We also have people from the team on the call. So, Jeremy, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Jeremy Lickness is how to pronounce my last name, in case anyone's curious. It could go either way, Likeness or Lickness, so it's the latter. And I'm a program manager for .NET Data, which obviously a huge part of that is the Entity Framework team. I was exposed to Entity Framework using the technology people don't like to talk about today, but that I just loved, which was Silverlight, and used it quite a bit for the back end and some fun things like WCF RIA services. Remember those? So
Excellent.
fun stuff.
Shai?
Yeah, my name is Shai Rojansky. I'm just a boring engineer on the team, on the EF team. I do I do a lot of work on Postgres, on lower level data stuff like system data that EF Core is built on top of, and Dapper and other things. And I have a special place in my heart for performance, and I hope we'll see some of that in 6.
Yeah, so Shai used to work with us as a collaborator contributor for the Postgres provider for many years. And luckily, we managed to actually get him to hire him to work full time on this stuff. So that's worked out great. And Bryce.
Hey, I'm Bryce Lamson. I'm an engineer on the team. I've been here about 10 years. Fun fact: I helped the RIA services team add Entity Framework 6 support. So.
Okay, so last time we started doing this thing where we go over the current state of affairs in the world of Entity Framework with this section that I now think is tradition because we're doing it twice, and we're calling it State of the Unicorn. And normally we have links and stuff here, but this time it's basically just celebration. EF Core 5 is out. That is the State of the Unicorn. So. If you haven't downloaded EF Core 5 yet, it's out there on NuGet. You can find more information on the link that Jeremy put up there. Get it from NuGet, look at the blog post, look at some of our old community stand-ups for information. Julie wrote a great article in Code Magazine. There's lots of information out there. Go try it. And if you find bugs and you report them to us in the next couple of days, there may still be a chance to get them into the first patch. So it's important that you give it a shot so that we can find any issues that are still remaining. So let's, without anything else, let's move on to talking about the features and the stuff that we put in. So, I should mention also, we asked before this streaming session for all of the guests to come up with some memory or anecdote or something from the EF Core past that they would like to share with us. So for each of the guests, we're going to start off with that. And I'm going to start with Julie. So Julie, welcome. What do you remember from the past?
I was just flipping on YouTube so I could actually participate in the conversation with everybody. And so I like the bad student. So I missed your question, Arthur.
My question was, you have a memory of EF Core of Entity Framework history that you want to share with us?
Well, I'll probably skip the whole link to SQL.
Probably wise, yeah.
Yeah, I do want to talk about that first time I saw it, which was in 2006 at TechEd, which was in Boston. I remember that because it was the actual only TechEd I actually got to drive to, because I live in Vermont, so it's like a four-hour drive. And so it didn't even have a name yet. Entity Framework was something that was being worked on at Microsoft Research based on, entity data modeling and all kinds of known stuff. And it was just, I guess, the SQL Server, like all of the data access, ADO.NET was still under the SQL Server umbrella.
That's right, yes.
Anybody remembers that? I can't believe it. Like my short-term memory is so bad. My long-term memory is great. So the Pablo Castro, right, who was, a brilliant, he's such a brilliant guy.
Yeah. Good friend of Diego's too.
Invited a handful of people, and when I say a handful, I mean like 3 or 4 people, to a meeting where they were showing us this ORM they were working on. So that was really my first time seeing it. And interestingly, I had not been using other ORMs. So the whole concept of ORM was very new to me when I was seeing EF for the first time. And therefore it was like, oh, this is so cool. Right? It was a totally new concept to me.
How did you come to be the one writing the big tome of a book about it?
Well, be careful. I like to talk. So what ended up happening was like, this is really, really cool. And everybody else said, this is Microsoft's third try at an ORM, right? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And I was like, oh, this is really fun. So I was doing more and more about it. And then somebody would ask me to write an article, and they would say, it can't be longer than 5,000 words. And I was like, but I have so much to tell. And so, after a while, there are different publishers were asking me to write, when are you going to write a book about anything? And so finally, this was it. Like, I had to, that whole thing, like, don't even try to write a book unless you're going to like explode if you don't.
So one of the things I remember about you writing the book, which I thought was really cool, is that you had constant communication with the team. You would constantly ask and say, hey, what about this? What about that? And that's what John has a similar communication with the team, has us review chapters. And I think that really helps to create great books. It's like you've got somebody outside trying to explain it in a way that has a different perspective from somebody, in it all the time explaining it. But with that communication with the team, so that the technical stuff is right, and it's presented. So I think we're very lucky to have two books both at the EF and at the EF Core level.
I feel that John has, for the book writing, that John has really taken that mantle from it was so much work. I just couldn't do it again, but. O'Reilly's asked me if other people, if somebody else could take over the title. I'm like, no, because I really didn't want that, because I was afraid people would assume that whoever they got to write it, who knows who, would not care as much as I had, and with an assumption that the book was as carefully created as mine had been. And I feel that John's work is on par, or actually, maybe a little better.
I think they're both great books.
Yeah.
Okay, shall we look at some code? So you chose log2 as your feature.
And then I said, but also
yeah. Can only pick one.
If I have to pick one, and I can't pick many to many.
No. So I just didn't want everybody to pick many to many, but
it's really interesting. But log2 is beautiful.
So I'm going to go into presentation mode here, which is not something I'm super used to yet, but it's a pretty easy way of getting a big font. So I've set up just a simple example here. This is blogs and posts, adding blog, putting posts in there, all the stuff that people are used to seeing. And then down in my context configuration here, we've got log2 set up as we had it in the blog post. So if I run this, you're gonna see that it logs everything to the console. And there we go. And by default, the logging level is debug. We can easily switch it to information. So I'll do that real quickly, just by doing a log level information here, and then run again, and we get output again, but limited to less stuff, just the info level. Julie, anything else you want to add to this? What other things should we try? Things that you particularly like? Just talk about it. I don't mind.
Well, bringing in the filtering is interesting. It's pretty similar to the way we had it before it was log2, when you had to actually create a factory.
Yes.
And one of the things I had said to you that you included in the blog post was that it really is such a nice blend of the simplicity of logging that we had in EF6, but takes advantage of all of that great logging framework and capability that .NET gives us. So and that it's all integrated.
Yep, absolutely. So you can have you can put filters in here which you can write yourself. So you can say, okay, if the ID.
We can't see your screen. There you go.
Oh, the ID. I haven't prepared this. This isn't. So you could see like is my event or whatever, like that. So you can write whatever filter you want, but we also have easier ways to put some of these filters in.
Like the logger categories, like we've
Right.
had. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's do the logger category one. If I find the right overloads, there are a few overloads here. Logger category. This one.
IntelliSense will help you better if you put another G in there.
G, yeah.
Ah, yes.
Pair programming at its best.
Okay, so this one. So I have to do the minimum level first. So let me put the minimum level in there. Logger level information, and then let's do. This isn't going so well because I can't find the right. Do I have to do a? I think I definitely do a new.
You have to. Yeah, you have to create an array. So
Yes.
you have to make new. That's the
That's
funny.
right.
Even if you're only doing one, you still have to make an array
Yes.
of categories.
So okay, so we have this DB logger. So I've got it.
So, hey,
So
everybody, you notice I'm telling the senior engineer on the team how to use this stuff.
yeah. And I wrote this feature as well. I'm not even the manager, so.
Yeah, I had to use it, so I went through this and I remember it when I was doing my EF course.
Yes. So we have this DB logger category class. This is so you can easily find. This is like a IntelliSense, easy to find all of the different categories we have. So, for example, I can say, okay, database is often one of the most interesting. So we could say we could do logger database, but we can also go nested into that and say, let's have just things associated with the command. And then you have to give this a name. So we have a name thing on the end of there. So now that's going to basically, I think that's right? Name is there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if I run this, it's now logging only things that are related to the database command. So you can see we've got command executed, command created, data reader disposing, but it's not logging any of the other events. Likewise, we could do, for example, connection name and run that. And now we see only the events related to the connection. And if we did the top level database here, then we get events associated with both connections and commands, anything that's database. So this is kind of like a hierarchical category, separation. Now, some of the categories, there's overlap between where things could go, and so they've been assigned what we think to be the most relevant category. But it's generally pretty easy to filter what you want. I think we could also do we have this class called Core Event ID.
Yeah, that's new. Like the idea that the type
Yes.
of event.
Right. So Core Event ID basically lists
really cool.
Yeah, all of the events that EF Core is generating from the core assemblies. Likewise, there's a relational event ID here, which are all of the events that are not common, so they won't be there if you're using Cosmos. But if you're using a relational provider, these are all of the events we generate. So I could say, for example, just tell me this event where the connection's closed. That's all I want to know. I want you to just tell me every time you close the connection. And if we run this, we then get a much smaller amount of log output, because basically it's just said this is all the times we're closing a connection. And likewise, if we wanted to say, okay, that's good, but what about the opening? We can go to relational event ID connection opened. So now we're going to get opened and closed events, but nothing else. So yeah, as Julie's mentioned, so we have, you can write your own filter, but you can also just very quickly come in here and say, okay, these are the events I care about, show them to me. And the idea of this is you don't need to add any external packages. The Microsoft extensions logging stuff is is really great, and we recommend that for production logging. You know, it integrates with CoreLog or whatever else you want to do. It integrates perfectly with ASP.NET Core or your host apps. But if you just want to get some logs out of EF Core because you're debugging or because something's, you know, you just don't understand what's going on and you don't want to add packages or anything, then this log2 is super valuable for that. Anything else we should show, Julie?
Well, just to mention, it was funny, after I had done all of this, so I'm updating my Pluralsight core to this, and after I had done this in a console app, right, so I used log2 in the DB context on configuring. Then I was working in an ASP.NET Core app, and just out of habit, you know, just because I was using it, I started adding log2 to the end of add DB context for the service. And then I was like, what? Wait, no, right? It's already built in there. So you can just take all of those same filterings and just put them in, you know, your app settings, and then it just plugs right in.
Absolutely. And you can, of course, put log2 in add DB context if if that's what you're using to configure and you want to just put quick logging in there. That all works. So one of the things that sometimes people miss is that anything that you can do in add DB context, you can do it on configuring and vice versa. So if you see something in an example in add DB context, that doesn't mean if you're not using add DB context that you can't use it. And the other thing that's actually, I think I mentioned this in the new documentation, you might be doing your provider stuff in add DB context. You could still have this. You can still have an onConfiguring method, and because this gets called regardless of whether you use add DB context or not. OnConfiguring is always called, so you can just add it in there. Like, you don't have logging your application, even if you're in add DB context. You could have this, you know, commented out and then uncomment that for when you're immediately wanting to do logging, and you don't have to change your add DB context at all. So anybody else want to chime in on log2? Anything else I should show?
Nice API naming, by the way. I love it.
Did we discuss that when you were still on the team, Diego? I can't remember.
You had a prototype, and
yes.
I really like the name.
Yes.
I think it's worth mentioning that the team sometimes spends hours discussing, you know, the naming of each function.
Yeah.
It can get absolutely awful sometimes. So
let me tell you a little story about that some of you may remember. So, you know, when we did code first and DB context, so EF Core 4.1 was the first time that was released. We started using this DB naming convention for the EF classes to align with DB connection and things like that, and to separate them from other similar concepts that were already in the object context, you know, API. And so we had this rule, put DB in front of everything. But then we have this class that's called database. So now, do we put DB database? Or do we put just database? And I think originally, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, I think originally we put it out there as DB database because that was consistent and it matched the rules. And everyone was like, what? DB database is ridiculous. So we changed it just to database and gave in on it. But that was a lot of many hours of discussions on those DB names and DB context and all of that kind of stuff. Any other comments?
Well, not about log2, but you probably also you saw Danny Simmons is here from the original team. So
cool.
And I was trying to show him the shirt that I'm wearing. He made these shirts when EF4 came out, because EF4 went from 2 directly to 4. No, yeah, version 2 directly 4. So I was trying to do this, and I can't see. Well, I'm assuming you can see it. It says EF4 on the back.
You can see it.
That's all.
That's very cool. Yeah, I remember those t-shirts. I still have one upstairs somewhere. That's good. I think Danny told me he has his like framed and up on the wall. So that's pretty cool. One more thing I'll mention before we move on, which I think is people don't necessarily know about, and that's these enable sensitive data logging and enable default errors. These are things that you can work with any of the logging mechanisms. So if you're using Microsoft extensions logging with ASP.NET, these work for that too. And And what they do is, let me change this so we can just see some query stuff. So I'm just going to do the log level information again. So if I remove these two and run this code again, and then we look at what the output has, you can see that even though we're inserting values, the parameters have this question mark. And that's because we don't want to show you any data that's from your database in logs or exception messages by default. And the reason for that is we have no idea what it is, and we have to assume it could be a social security number or some other personal information. However, it's really difficult to figure out what's going on when this crashes and you're like, but which one is it trying to insert? Which one is it trying to relate? Because you don't have any of the key values, right? And EF6 was notoriously difficult about that because there was no way to get the key values. And whenever anybody asked, we were like, we can't put them in because it's a security concern, you know, for privacy. Enable sensitive data logging. What that does is, first of all, if we go to the top of the log here, it spits out a warning. It says, you've got sensitive data logging. Make sure you're not exposing sensitive data and you're not doing this in production, blah, blah, blah. And then when we actually look at these, now, rather than just having question marks, we have the values of all the parameters. So now we can see that this one is being inserted as ID1, and that's super useful. So definitely, if you're trying to debug stuff, know to switch this on. I'm not going to demonstrate the enable detailed errors because it's a little bit more difficult to set it up. This one is useful if you have a null value or a null exception coming out when you materialize queries. So this often is useful, for example, if you've marked something as not nullable in the model, but then there happens to be a null in your database somewhere that's snuck in. And all you get from EF is null ref exception, it blew up, and you don't know where. What enable detail errors does is it wraps every read of the database into an exception, into a try catch, so that you can get detailed information about what exactly it was when you're doing the query that caused the error. That has some perfit. We measured the perfit back in the 2x days. We don't know what the perfit is right now. Shai is going to remeasure the perfit, and if we can make this do a pattern which allows us detailed errors without taking a significant hit, we might make this on by default. But now it's off by default, and if you get those weird null ref exceptions out of queries, switch it on and run it again. You might get something a lot more useful. Okay, should we move on, or anybody want to add anything else?
Move on.
Okay.
Move on.
Okay, so who's going next? Should we go with John next? And I think you've actually prepared some code to show John. So
yeah,
we want to talk about your memory first, and then we'll switch and see your code.
Yeah, just to start out, I did want to say, Julia already knows this, but when I was asked if I would write, if it can be considered to write the book, I said, have you asked Julie?
Yeah.
They said yes, and she doesn't want to do it. So I was thinking back to when I first used EF, EF, yeah, and it was back at EF5. And it's an interesting story because I was a developer, and then I became a manager, and then my wife got me back into programming because she's a lecturer in maths, and is her special area is healthcare modeling, particularly in developing countries. And she
very interesting.
So we my wife and I did a big job for South Africa, looking at where to place laboratories for HIV/AIDS testing. And I was looking for something. I was using geography in SQL, and if you may remember that it's EF Core was the first EF4.
Yes.
EF5, sorry, was the first one where it supported geography.
Spatial types. Yes, that's right.
So that's where I started. So it was EF5 then, and it's EF Core 5
now. Yes.
Yeah.
We talked about whether or not we should try and skip version numbers or anything, because of confusion. But Hunter basically said, no, it's 5. That's it. Done deal. So
yeah.
So that was it.
Yeah. The core works, doesn't it?
Yeah. So what's your what's your impression of the spatial support in EF Core versus that's in EF?
Well, I haven't used. I did some work in that area, and it was very good, but it doesn't pay. So,
yes.
But it got my skills up, and then I went into being a contract programmer.
Right.
So I haven't really used it in EF Core.
Right. Fair enough.
But yeah.
I mean, I definitely, this spatial is interesting because it was challenging for us in when we came to EF Core, because the support in Entity Framework is very tied to what SQL Server supports. The types are very tied to SQL Server. It's also very much integrated into the framework. And we wanted to do something for spatial that would both use a community library, not invent another spatial library. And that's why we, Bryce and other people did a lot of research on that. And we decided to use NTS, Net Topology Suite. And I think that's been very successful, and it's also an extension package. So if you're not using spatial types, you don't have the overhead of that. And we've allowed that to work across multiple providers. So Postgres and MySQL both have spatial support as well, and SQLite has spatial support. So Bryce, I don't know if you want to talk any more about that, but I think that went really well.
Yeah, I think we learned a lot of lessons from the EF5 APIs, and even just like the layering for the providers. I think Oracle was the only other one that actually managed to support spatial on EF5. Whereas now, we have Postgres, SQLite, MySQL, others I know. So it's a testament to like lessons learned from EF5, and now we're bringing those into EF Core. We do that a lot.
Absolutely, yes.
I think Shai built the Postgres support first, and then we kind of got inspired.
That's true.
Yeah, I remember that thing. But I mean, the thing I also love about this is it's a great story about how it's now really cross-database and cross-platform. So it really does work on all databases. It's even the same API because it uses the same Net Topology Suite package. Everything works so completely in contrast to the way things were. And I actually fiddled with Postgres spatial support back for EF6 or EF5, and it was awful and not really possible. It's great to see this.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, John. So I think you wanted to talk about changetracker.clear. So this is going to be interesting.
And you're going to say that's so detailed, But and there's a reason behind this, because I was not. I had a big part of my life where I wasn't programming. And when I came back to being a programmer, I had to learn it all again. And the one thing that I just loved was unit testing, because I understood it from a developer point of view, and I also understood it as a management person, because I've been out in Hong Kong in updating a big system out there, and it had an intermittent problem, and that's just really, that burns into you, the ability that you want to test it. And so I picked up unit testing a lot, and but I want to be efficient, because you can just you could write thousands of unit tests. I know you have in EF Core, but you've got to, when you're working for a client, you've got to do. Oh, thank you. That's my book at the bottom for you. You've got to get the right balance of how you do it. So anything that makes me able to write unit tests quickly and accurately is what I want.
Yeah.
So can I share my screen? Yeah. So this is a typical unit tests that I might write. So I love using SQLite in memory. You can't use it for everything, but it's very good. So in this thing, I'm saying I set up a context. I add a book to it. This is to test things, and then I read that book back, and I'm going to do something with that, and I'm looking at the reviews. Now, the fact is that I didn't put an include in here. That's the bug. But because I could get really technical in here, but what happens is when you add a book into the context, when you read it back, it's going to try and use it. It tries to use that. It doesn't do it for performance. It does it because it doesn't want another instance of the book. That should be only one instance, and I think you call that identity resolution. Yeah. So this, what would happen if I run this? I can run it. I haven't got a include of the reviews, but it says there's 2 reviews, and that's because, go back to this, it's picked up what I did here when I put it into the database. So what I used to do is I used to have 2 contexts, yeah, and then that would work. That would come back and say that there are, well, in my case, null reviews. Okay.
Yes, and that's the way we generally recommend people do it.
Yeah, but if we go on to this lovely change tracker here, what will that do? What that does is it blows away all the tracked entities, right? So that when I do it again, I get the right answer, right? And that there's nothing there.
Right. So the essentially then the context is designed to be used as a single unit of work, and what you're really doing is say, I'm actually kind of abusing that a little bit in my test to say, okay, I'm going to use the same context. I'm going to do 1 unit of work, but then instead of creating another one, because it's a test and I just want it to be as simple and short as possible, I'm going to clear the context. And then that effectively makes it like now I have a new context to do the second part of my test, as if I were creating a second unit of work.
Yeah. And look, you want to write, if you're going to write a lot of unit tests, you want to write them really quickly, right?
Yes.
You don't want to mess about. And that's why I love that. And then just to make sure you've got the real one, this would work because it has the include. And do you know, I have got this wrong on client systems. You know, I've forgotten to do something to clear out the thing.
Yeah.
Does it matter? And then I haven't really caught something, and that bugs me. So I love this.
So I think this may be a great opportunity to show another feature in EF Core 5, and that's the change tracker debug view. So I don't know how brave you are, John, but if you want to set up some breakpoints in your test there, and we run it in the debugger, can we do that?
Which one do you want? This one or
the one with change tracker clear in it? The one that you showed us? Yeah. So so put a breakpoint. You know. Basically, let's see, after you do the add book with 2 reviews today, actually put it before that. So as soon as we've done the context database ensure created, let's put a breakpoint there.
Yep.
Okay, and let's run that.
All right.
Okay, so when it stops on that breakpoint, go into your locals window there. And find the context, and then expand out the context.
It's not going to be very big for people. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Go into change tracker. So expand change tracker out there, and then expand out debug view. So we've gone context change tracker debug view. And then there's a short view and a long view. Let's look at they're both empty at the moment. So open up. So we can see right now, we don't need to open it up in the magnifying glass, but we can see right now that both the context is not tracking anything. The debug views are empty. Now do a step over so we do that next line of your code.
I'll put a break.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, go back to
okay, now, go back. Now you'll see it's changed. It's gone red. The VS has detected, okay, something's changed after you did that next run. So open up the long view there with the little magnifying thing. Yeah. And then hopefully this will be big enough for people to see. If not, we might want to copy it into Notepad. I don't think you can zoom on that window.
Well, in Windows.
Yeah, so if we put it, either do a fancy zoom thing in Windows or just open Notepad and put it into Notepad because the copy and paste into Notepad because it's easy to.
I haven't seen this. I want to see it.
It's easy to see. You can easily make Notepad bigger. This is what I was doing. So I recorded some sessions for the on.net series yesterday, and we did it. We just did Notepad, and then you can control mouse wheel up will increase the font.
Windows. It's Windows Zoom. Mouse wheel.
Either way.
Well, I mean, that's the way to do it on Windows.
I think if you just go into View, you can zoom as well.
So much easier on a MacBook.
Go into View.
I think we're getting
Linux, so.
We're getting a little deep here, man.
If you go up to View,
actually, you know what? It looks much better to me in YouTube than it does in StreamYard. I can see very clearly in YouTube.
Yay!
Yeah, Control Plus. There we go. Control Plus.
All right. Okay. Control Plus.
Okay, do that a few more times.
Yeah. All right.
Yay. All right. So go back to the top of that.
It's a good thing we were all here.
This debug view.
How many programmers does it take to zoom into a window?
We needed Scott Hanselman, right? He's like a magician with that.
Well, to be fair, I just kind of threw this on John without any warning. So you can see in there that this is the debug view of the state manager. So this is telling you that you're tracking an author entity and it's got an ID 1 and it's currently in the unchanged state, a book with ID 1. And then these are the property values. So this is a really good way of letting you know what's in the state of your state manager. So, if you're having trouble because it's like, why is that relationship being nulled out? What's happening to that foreign key? This is a great way to view it. If you close out or just switch back to the debugger here, and there's also then the short view. So let's do the same thing with the short view. And let's go back into Notepad. So the short view is similar, but this basically just tells you about relationships. So it's missing all the actual property values and stuff out, but it's telling you, you can see the book author and it has the foreign key value there saying it's, what it's related to. The foreign key is related to book ID 1. So that's and then if we go back to the debugger and go to the next line, then we can demonstrate that clear really does work.
All right, so I'm going to press S5.
Yep. And now if we go back there, we should see it's all empty again in the debug view.
Yep.
And if we go back to the debugger, to the code again, and then we do the query.
All right.
And now if we look back in the debug view, you can see now it's populated that context again. All of this is now tracking. And you can see there that you're maybe expand the short view out there. So you can see that you're only tracking one entity. So because you've missed your include, you can see, oh, I'm not bringing in the other one. So your test, obviously, in this case, would have caught it because you've got the clear. But it's an easy way, again, of saying, oh, I've stepped over the code, and now in the debugger, I can see what's actually happening in the state manager. And I think I use this all the time when I get issues on GitHub and I have to try and repro it and figure out if it's a bug or anything. And it's super, super useful. So I hope other people will find that very useful as well. Okay. Anything else? Go ahead.
First of all, I want to say I love Clear for building demos. Like if I'm like in my courses, right, I'll have a method and I'll say, and if we did this and then we did that, and if we're doing disconnected, and I'll use Clear in between to kind of emulate disconnected in, a console method. And I'm always very clear about the fact that, I'm doing this because this is just, testing and demos and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But other than the fact that, I think for production, no, you don't want to use that, right? You've got the unit of work and everything. But is there any other reason, Arthur, that, you're like, here's this tool, but I don't really want you to.
So it's a
just a danger,
philosophical, principled position rather than a pragmatic position. I think there's a frustration somewhat on the EF team sometimes that we design this thing to be a unit of work and people are very reluctant to use it as a unit of work. Not everybody, lots of people, follow that guidance and are very successful with it. And so, we've banged on about it over and over again. Even in the docs I've been writing, updating for 5.0, it's like, it's a unit of work, short-lived, throw it away. So, it's kind of like putting Clear in there. It's kind of like saying, yeah, okay, we get that, but actually it's fine, if you want to clear the change track sometimes. And pragmatically, I admit that is perfectly fine. And
then it's like lazy loading.
It's let's not go there.
No, don't go.
I just mean in that, if you don't understand what it's there for and how it works, it's easy to get in trouble with.
Yes, it can hide that perhaps your architecture isn't what it should be in your application. And that's kind of the danger of it, that people will just say, oh, I'll just do this and not think about the larger kind of architectural issues. But that being said, I'm generally speaking very, very much in favor of pragmatic things that, make your life easier. And so, we added the feature. So, use it, but understand it.
Notice he didn't say I added the feature.
You have to
it's
be
a team effort.
But when you're working for clients and they want it now, and so there is you want to get it right. It's got to be correct, but you also don't want to have gold plate taps.
Yes.
Can't go too far. So unless you tell me this chain tracker in unit test is the way I'm going to go, because
I think that's fine. I would still recommend that documented it. You just do it with 2 context instances. I think that's less trouble prone. And personally, I don't think it takes that much time longer to do that. But I totally take your point that your clients are paying for your time, and you want to give value without adding additional overhead. So valid.
And we've got the new using var without the curly braces. That's got to save at least 2% of your programming.
Yeah, exactly.
Time.
Yes.
it's good.
Okay. Shall we move on to the next topic? So I think. Should we do many-to-many next, or should we leave that to last? Let's leave that one till last and have Erik talk about the reverse engineering. So, Erik, do you have an anecdote or a memory you want to share first?
Yes, when I was asked to come up with something, I was thinking a little bit about what it's like to be looking at what you're doing from the outside. And of course, GitHub is now not only a place to store your source control, it's also almost like a social platform, social media, in by way of the discussion that happens in the issues, and that made me think back of some of the good, the bad, and the ugly of the EF Core issue tracker. So yes.
Not sure where this is going.
You're dreading it already, I can tell. Yes. No, let's see. When I will start with the ugly one first, and let's get that over with. We had somebody wanted a provider for a obscure database engine embedded deep in the bowels of Windows called Essent.
Yeah.
And yes, now you remember. Yes, and that whole conversation just got completely out of hand, and I mean, you had somebody else outside the team coming in and censoring, deleting issues, and it was actually pretty ugly. Yes. And that of course it's a social platform, so good things can happen. People can bring good feedback. There can be a lot of noise on a social platform, but that was a kind of a sad moment in the issue tracker history of EF Core. Let me put it like that. Then one of the ones that stuck with me as being a little bit bad, not because of what you had done, was somebody wrote, occasionally EF Core loads my entire database.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, right. Then everybody said, "What?" That's unbelievable. How on earth could that happen? Somebody reported it, and I think it was like he couldn't really come up with a reproduction, and it only happened under some special circumstances. And when it happened, everything, of course, went ballistic because he was loading everything in his database with millions of rows. But he couldn't really produce a repro, so the case was closed. But then he came back like half a year later. Oh, he had figured out what it was. He was using some logging system, and I'm not naming anybody here. That kind of traversed the exception, and when it came to the DB sets, it was calling toList on all the DB sets, causing EF to load the entire database. So that was an interesting / bad thing, but it had a perfectly reasonable explanation.
When you get those issues filed, and your first impression is, that's not possible. It's not doing that, you know. And the one of those that I remember the most is Bryce probably remembers this too. It was in the EF6, I think, and it was the package manager tools, I believe. And somebody said, "Look, when I run this tool, it copies my entire project and duplicates it into a different directory." and we're like, it can't be possible that you do, update database or whatever it was, and it copies your entire project. And I ran the repo. Sure enough, it did. And I'm like, Bryce, look, it's actually doing that. You remember that, Bryce?
That was weird. I think it was like copying the entire C drive or something. It was weird.
And it turned out we were making some call into a Visual Studio API, and it was like if you made that on a directory or something, then it resulted in it duplicating that directory when in fact we were just trying to copy a file or something like that. I can't remember the full details, but it was definitely a case where the first impression was there's no way that's true.
Yeah.
But it was.
Yes. So the last one I wanted to bring, there's many long threads with bumpy roads, but the one that really stuck out was actually one that was filed in 2014 by Bryce, called SQLite table rebuilds. And of course that's just the whole topic seemed completely impossible. You can't do that in SQLite. Luckily, SQLite has evolved over since for those 6 years. And lo and behold, SQLite rebuilds have been completed in 2020. So that was actually one of the good ones.
Yes.
So we've done a great comment in there too. He somewhere recently said, "Yeah, I opened this issue before my currently 6-year-old child was even born."
Exactly, and you had a nice gift from Titanic. Yeah,
I think one of the challenges we have on the EF team is that we're a small team. There's me and Jeremy and then 5 engineers, and that's it. And we do all this stuff. And there's so many different things that people want. Everybody comes and says, "Why haven't you done this? This is clearly the most important thing." And yet, you say, "Oh, well, actually, it's got 29 votes, and that places it, even like number 37 on the list of the most voted, regardless of any other considerations." So it's very difficult. It's very difficult for us to, do everything when everybody wants it. But I will say that I think 3.1 was a really good. We got to a really good foundation there, and the number of things that this team has delivered and the community have delivered in 5.0 has been really impressive. This is definitely the best team I've worked on in my career. The engineers on this team are just exceptional, and I love them all. So thank you guys for all your work.
And then when I see the way that you're handling various ways of expressing a need for something coming from the outside, I think you handle it in an extremely admirably way. Kudos to the entire team for doing it the way you're doing it. Also because you have been working in open source for so many years, so you have a lot of experience that we may not see with some of the other Microsoft teams. You really shine there, I think.
I appreciate that, and thank you from myself and all the team.
Send that clip to the boss.
So it's interesting because we there was an issue 6 months, a year ago, where there was a bit of a blow up, and somebody posting some stuff that wasn't really within our community stand-ups, and that caused a discussion inside Microsoft. And the one thing I've noticed that has really changed inside Microsoft, and I think the EF team and the ASP.NET team have been at the forefront of this, and that's that we want it to be an open, engaging environment where everybody feels that they can come and comment and have creative discussions. And previously it was kind of like, yes, we want that, but there are customers too, and so if they're kind of mean and shout and say rude things to us, then maybe that's okay because they're customers. And I think we don't think that's not the case anymore. It's like, if you're going to come and participate in our forums where we want to engage with you, we want the community to be involved and everything, it's got to be a very open, engaging, polite, whatever you say, we're going to try and help you. Even if helping you is to say you're doing this, you're posting this in the wrong place and you should go over there and post it, that's still, something we can do. And we have to drive that by example from the Microsoft side. Like, Microsoft people need to be setting that example. And I think we try really hard to do that on the EF team, and it's paid off.
I think you succeed in doing that.
And I think it's paid off. We have a great community.
Can I say your weekly email that you send out, Arthur, is just, it's lifeblood to me, because you're telling me, what's in, what's out, what's going on. It's the level of communication is just great.
That's also interesting from an internal Microsoft perspective as well, because the way that came about is that I was in a meeting with other leads of ASP.NET, and I remember Damien was there, Damien Edwards, and he said something like, "But it's hard for me to know what's going on in EF." And I'm like, "Well, should I send out an email every week that just lets you know what's going on?" And he's like, "Yeah, that would be great. Like, if we had that, it would be much easier." And I went away from that meeting and thought, why would I send this just to people internal at Microsoft? Like, if I'm going to write this, then everybody should be able to see this, because we're developing in the open. It's not like there's stuff to hide or anything like that. And so that's how I ended up putting that out to everybody. And I've had similar feedback from people saying that, it's very useful. So, I appreciate that. But I think it's, again, a place where as Microsoft, we're really living this, let's develop this in the open. Let's communicate as much openly as we possibly can, and that's exciting to me. That's something that when I joined Microsoft, I didn't think we'd get to where we are now in open source and community and cross-platform and all that stuff. And it's cool. It really is cool.
You really are in a good place. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So should we do some reverse engineering?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So I have a project. You want to share? You can share. But
I hope you have some demos ready because I don't.
Yes, I have.
Fantastic. Yes. Yes. So the features that I favorited are actually features, excuse me for saying so, that I had already included in EF Core Power Tools previously to EF Core 5, but it's delightful to see that they are now also available to command line users.
Yes.
Yes.
So what I have here is basically I've created a database before we started. It's in the back end. I'm using user secrets, and I'm using an ASP.NET application in this case, just because it sets up all the options and everything. And then you can use this, put your connection string in user secrets if you're local, and then I'm using this name equals syntax in there so that you guys can't see the connection string to my local SQL Server instance. So let me start off by running this. This is just a default command, and hopefully it will work, and we'll get some entities created. So this is where I'm not entirely sure about how to do to view the files when I'm in this presentation mode. So
try Alt F1, Arthur.
Alt F1.
Try it.
That didn't do it.
Whoa.
Sorry, Alt 1, not 1. Alt 1. Excuse me.
Hey! This is when you have a writer expert on the team. That's good. Okay, so what we've got generated. This is just a default. So we've got blog. It's got posts. We've generated a blog context. It's got this name equals in the connection strings. It's already automatically done that for us, which is really nice. So there's nothing exposed here, and we have a post. Okay, so that's the default.
Should we just recap what you just did? Was you had an existing database, and now you're using the command line to generate EF Core entities and DB context based on the contents of that existing database?
Correct, yes. So one of the things that I can do now, right, is I can take this protected on configuring. If I wanted to, I can remove this from the generated class, and I can, because this is set up as a partial class C, right? So I could go in here and say, okay, public partial class, my blog's contents, and then I can put this in here, right? Bring in the options builder. Okay, so now it's not in my database context because I put it in here in my partial, and this should still. If I run this, actually I don't have any code to run. Let's assume that when I run this still works the same. But one of the features we added in 5 is this no on configuring. So normally let me do it without no on configuring, just so you see. So hopefully it will overwrite things. I think it does. No.
Force. Or dash F.
Dash F to overwrite things. Dash F. Thanks, Bryce. Yeah, so now if we come up here and try and compile, it's going to say, no. It says, basically, you've got 2 of these things, right? Because when we rescaffolded it, it put it back added it back in here. So I can find my terminal. So we added this feature, no on configuring.
Two hyphens at the first.
2 hyphens. That's right. I'm using the long thing. No on configuring. Thanks, Bryce. And when this scaffolds, it basically says, okay, I see you've, build failed. Yes. So I could, what's the thing to skip the build, Bryce?
I think it's -- no -- build, yeah.
No build. So if you've done something like this and you know everything's in a good state except it just doesn't build, how you know that we're not going to get into, then you can just tell EF, don't bother building, I'm good, and it should work. So in this case, we come back here now, we have no error because EF Core has not included that no on configuring. So that then you can re-engineer your database without having to continually go and remove or change the on configuring. Because you may also have it, for example, you may have an add DB context call and you want to do your connection string in there and there, so you don't want the on configuring. So that's one of the things we added. Erik, other things to show?
Yeah, no, I was just looking at the names of the context. So they're I noticed that they're already called blocks and posts.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've done pluralization is on by default now.
Yep. So we've done pluralization by default. So we have the blogs DB set, the post DB set, which is really nice. And the other thing we have is we do this nullable disable. Because this code is not it assumes that you're not using nullable reference types, and so to make that very clear, we're scaffolding this nullable disable in 5.0.
Yeah, and if you want to bring back the previous behavior of no pluralization because you don't want to change your entire code base because you're upgrading to an existing code base to EF Core 5. Sorry.
Is that the option?
I think so.
Pluralize.
Pluralize.
No pluralize. Oh, sorry. It's good we have Bryce here.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm glad I was right.
So where do I look to see the no pluralize?
Context.
So now we have a.
Oh yeah, the table is called blocks. Yeah.
So yes, because I created this from EF and I already had DB sets. So that's a interesting wrinkle there.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to pluralize if it's already pluralized.
No, exactly.
Actually, what's cool though is that when we do it with pluralization, see what we're going to see here is it does do something useful because even though it says pluralization, it's actually handling singularization as well, right?
Yeah.
So now you see, before we had these, because I didn't delete everything, we had blog and blogs. But when we in EF5, it would have created before EF Core 5, it would have created blogs. But in EF Core 5, it now creates the singularized blog.
Yeah.
So it's confusing to call those things singularization. So we just call them pluralization, but it's a thing.
But it is confusing that it's called pluralization as well.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
We're just more used to throwing that word around, I guess. Singularization will make it in soon.
Okay.
Yes.
Anything else to show? Or should we,
I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to many. Diego, so welcome. You want to share something from history or something that you remember from EF?
Yeah, I kept changing my mind on what I would want to talk about, and I saw the comment from Danny Simmons earlier today in the feed, and I just realized I feel the same way. He said something that it makes him very happy to see the team release EF Core 5 and how things were, and that he still considers it was his baby. And I think there are like so many people that have been part of the team and have contributed to the culture of the team by putting their heart in this work. And I'm not going to try to mention all of them, but of course there is Rowan, there is Andrew.
Yeah.
There are like so many people, and I remember there was this guy that we found answering questions in the forums when we had forums to talk to the community, and that was the main way we talked to the community and answer questions. And there was this guy that was answering questions with the depth that was incredible. That he seemed to be like part of the team. We were not even open source when he did this, and he knew exactly how things work. And we got him to interview on the team, and we ended up hiring him, and he was David De Winter. And after working with us he was a fantastic developer, by the way,
Yes.
and he was working on tests at some point, but after like I don't know, a year or two that he was working with us, he said, okay, I know this other guy that is also amazing, and I work with him, and I would like to get him to interview, and he introduced us to Bryce. And I don't know, it's just a chain of people that
Yes.
put their passion on this product and have contributed to make it great over time. But I agree with Arthur that this is the best team, and it's probably working at its best right now, and the product is in the best shape ever.
I think so, yeah.
But I'm also seeing it from the outside now, so
Yes.
I know exactly how Danny feels about it.
Yes. So
I had no idea you'd come back. But I know you're not one to announce things on Twitter or whatever, but maybe I missed it. But
so I came back to Microsoft after a few months of being out, after a year, and I'm working on Azure networking now on the software-defined network team, and it's a fantastic team as well.
Cool.
So I'm learning like crazy. But
so I'll go ahead and send the team chocolate again this year and make sure they share it with you.
Yes. So two things that thing I had. So Danny Simmons and Jeff Durstadt were the people who hired me, and my story about Danny that I always remember is that I interviewed for Microsoft, and there were 3 teams that were interviewing me, one of which was EF. And I probably would have picked EF anyway, to be honest. But on the night after the interviews, Danny called me at home and was like, anything else you want to know? Really want you to come work here. So, wanted to just check if you had questions and how you're doing and everything. And that really sealed it for me. I'm like, if he cares enough to call and, ask this thing, proactively, then I'm just going to go work on EF. And I think that was definitely the right choice. So I'm very thankful for Danny for giving me the opportunity, and Jeff, who I learned an awful lot as being my first manager. On many-to-many, Diego. So I remember talking to you about this design basically for many-to-many before we even started on what became EF Core. And you remember that?
Yep. Crazy. Yes.
Yeah, so I don't it's really hard to remember whose ideas things actually are, especially when you're such a interactive team and you collaborate so much on stuff. I'm pretty sure it was Diego's idea, but maybe it wasn't. But the idea, we had many-to-many in EF6, and it worked, right? But it was kind of like a bolted-on external piece. Certainly after we did foreign key associations, it became that way, because it was based very much on independent associations in the entity data model, and that made it very much an outlier with the rest of the way other relationship worked. And also, it was very, very limited. It was like you could have a many table with keys in it, a join table, but it couldn't have any payload on it. You really couldn't change the mapping. You couldn't query it directly, And so Diego was basically like, well, we should just have 2 things: that many-to-many entity in shadow state, and that actually ultimately turned into being a shared type entity type, which was a nice 2 ideas coming together nicely there. And then we should have skip navigations over that. So basically it's just like any other relationship, but you can view it as a many-to-many. And that was brilliant idea. And that, and since we started EF Core, that's how we wanted to do many-to-many. We didn't want to just go in from the beginning, bolt on something like EF6. So even though there was all those people saying many-to-many, we needed to get to a point where we could do it the right way, and a way that was extensible, not just completely magic. I'm very proud that I think we managed to do that and deliver that. Diego?
Yeah. Also, I would say it's my favorite feature in EF Core 5, not because I am planning to use it a lot personally, or I would use it a lot if I was building database applications. Mm-hmm. It's very convenient. It makes the queries that you have to write when you are like traversing many-to-many associations much easier to understand. Otherwise, they are like
yes,
mind-numbing, I guess.
yes,
but there are workarounds, right? So the reason I really like it is the way we decided to build it, and the fact that it composes like several different features, new features that actually you can use without many-to-many associations.
yes,
and get the same experience, but it's better and it's more extensible. And that was like it actually connects with what I was saying before, that so many people contributed to the culture of the team. I think that we ended up distilling this culture in which we like to create like composable features built of small aspects that we add to the framework. And Shadow State was like that too. It's like we knew that customers wanted to have entities without foreign key properties sometimes, but we didn't want them to work the way independent associations did. So we came up with Shadow State, saying, okay, if we add Shadow State support, then we can basically put the foreign keys in Shadow State and it will work great. And then it's fantastic when you had this idea and then it actually works when somebody writes all the code and writes all the tests.
Yes.
So I congratulate congratulate the team for implementing many-to-many, because I probably had the idea, but I'm not 100% sure it was originally. But it's fantastic that it works also. It's not that easy.
So we haven't got that much time left, and we've seen many-to-many. There's lots of good information out there on many-to-many. There's a community stand-up that we did a few weeks ago where I did a deep dive into it, and that's like, if you want to learn about many-to-many, go see that. It shows how, as Diego said, it's composed from indexer properties and from property bag entity types, which are also themselves compositions for on shared type entity types. And I'm saying all these words and throwing out there, but you want to know what they are, go look at that stand-up. But I don't want to go without showing any code. So let's switch and just show the simple example of many-to-many. So here again, I have just setting up something with big tags and posts. So I have a model here with posts and tags. And all you need to do to make this a many-to-many in EF Core 5 is put a collection on posts that points to tags and a collection on tag that points to posts. And that's it. You don't actually need there's no additional configuration in on model creating or anything like that. And then I can add to them in just the normal way I would. So I can create a new post and I can just put different tags on each post. So if I run this, you can see that we indeed get a table automatically created for the many-to-many, if I can find it. So we're creating the blogs table. We're in the inserts already. I need to go further up. Create the database, right? That's where we create the database. Now we're creating a table for blogs. We're creating a table for posts. And we are creating a table for the join table, right? I don't see it. It must be there, right? I'm just missing it in my scrolling, because otherwise this wouldn't work at all. That's weird. Don't know where it is. Anybody see what I'm doing wrong? Oh, I know what I'm doing wrong. I'm not running the many-to-many demo.
I was going to say, it looks like you're running a different demo.
Yeah. Okay. That's better. Now we're creating posts, we're creating tags, and we're creating post tags, the join table automatically. Yay. And we get the correct output at the end. So I want to show one more thing about this many-to-many just really quickly, and it illustrates another thing we added in EF Core 5, another debug view, in fact. And that's basically, I want to look at what the model is for this under the cover. So I'm going to set a breakpoint there, and I'm going to run in the debugger here. And then I'm going to expand out my context. And remember, we looked at change tracker debug view here. And there's also model debug view. So you go model debug view, and it has a long view and a short view. The long view is pretty hard to read because it has all of the annotations in there. The short view is easier to read, although I think that's a bug in the rider presentation mode there. So let me quick to Sublime and put it on there.
There we go.
Okay, so what you can see here is this is the entity type that we had originally, the post, and this is the entity type we had. And then this is the skip navigations. This is the navigation we added from post to tags, and likewise, it has an inverse here for going back the other way. Then this is what EF created as the join entity type. This is the thing that maps to the join table. So you can see it's actually a dictionary of string to object because it's, as I said, a shared type entity type. And we've created automatically the foreign keys for this that point to either side of the relationship. They're named after the navigation. So this is post ID rather than post ID. There's good reason for that, because if you have multiple relationships, then the naming becomes very ambiguous. However, you can configure this and change this to be whatever ID properties you want. And then it's got it's using these indexer properties in the dictionary as the foreign key. So probably a lot there that makes absolutely no sense to most people. But if you want to find out more about this, go look at the deep drive or find one of the other sessions on Many-to-Many that go into this in more detail.
We had a question pop up, which is interesting. How did it pick post tags versus tag posts?
It's probably alphabetically would be my guess. So it's interesting, like we don't do things alphabetically because we like things alphabetically. We do them alphabetically because it creates a consistent, stable ordering in the metadata. And this is one of the things we found with the old EF is that if you just have things in a arbitrary order and then you add another, say, you add another type to it and that order changes, and in the metadata, things can become easily ambiguous as to what they mean. And that caused us a bunch of bugs. So now we try to make a consistent ordering of everything metadata. And that also helps when you're diffing things and stuff like that. So I suspect it's alphabetical.
Arthur, I don't know whether it's useful, but in the book, I had to come up with an example of how to use property bags.
Oh, yes.
And I don't know whether you and I was just trying to see, why they might be useful. And I use them to dynamically create an entity when the system started up, say getting data in from a JSON file or something.
Yes. So that's go ahead.
Yeah.
So
it's very flexible.
Yes. So the idea here, obviously, or maybe not obviously, I shouldn't say that. The idea of property bag entity types is that dictionary string to object is not something that you have defined in your application, right? It's just something that comes from the base class library from the BCL. And so you can use that to represent any entity type in your model. Like, you don't have to have defined a post CLR type to represent a post and a blog CLR type to represent a post. So I'm not going to claim that this is a fully dynamic, system that EF has here, because it still requires the model to be defined, but it allows you to be dynamic in a way that you don't need to define CLR types in order to do that, which is obviously why it's useful for us in Many-to-Many, because there is no CLR type defined in the application for this join table, so we need to use something else.
Do you want to see a bit of code?
We're quite. We're low on time, and I want us to get to cake. So I think maybe we should do that now. What do people think?
Look at the dog.
Look at the dog.
The dog, yes. Samson wants cake too. Okay, so
the dog knows about the cake, obviously.
For those of you of a British persuasion with a certain amount of grey hair, this could be our live TV elephant pooping on the floor moment from Blue Peter. So if anybody gets that reference, congratulations. What I'm saying here is things could go wrong, because we are now going to test out a super new Microsoft technology that I don't think anybody has seen before. In fact, we're not technically allowed to use it, so don't tell anybody if you're watching this that we did this. But what we have is what looks like here real cupcakes, right? They look real cupcakes, but they're not real cupcakes. They're actually, this is augmented reality, right? And it's super fancy augmented reality, because I can take one of these and let me, Julie, are you ready for your EF Core 5 celebratory cupcake?
Yes,
okay,
and so Samson.
These, if it works, will transfer over the internet to Julie and transform into
something that Samson can also share with me, which is
whatever
apple.
she
I requested
chooses.
apple.
Let's see if it works. So here we go, Julie. You got that?
Wow. And I have to take a bite off of it for Samson.
Yeah, I hope it still tastes good after transferring over the wire like that.
Well, it didn't turn into a fly.
Okay, so I have let me give the guess first. So John, since you're on my screen, here's your cupcake.
Okay. Yeah, I got it.
Got it. Wow,
Nice.
Worked again. This is good. Thought it would be crashing blue screen by now. Diego, cupcake for you.
Okay. Let me.
Wow.
Nice.
Alpha Core.
And Eric, here's yours.
Whoa.
This is going
Nice.
really well. And now I have two left, although I might actually be able to find another one down here. They wouldn't all fit on the plate. So Jeremy, you want like a cupcake?
Absolutely.
Here you go.
Whoa!
That one grew big. And
Got upgraded.
Shy?
Give it to Bryce, Arthur. I think Bryce needs a cookie.
Oh, this Bryce, you want to go first? Bryce, here we go.
Whoa!
That is. Oh.
I want my
think I
money
better
back.
verify the hashes before eating them.
I go with an apple.
Definitely verify the hash there. Shy, we've got one left. Here you go.
Samson's eating.
One left.
Hey,
Shy.
what about you?
Here you go. I have.
Okay.
Yeah. There you go.
Big surprise.
It's
Became something else because I was coding and I messed up the whole transfer thing. So I'm very sorry about that. I was hoping you'd run out of cupcakes before you reach me. So
the amazing thing about these augmented cupcakes is that you can have as many as you want, and they take very little time to make or anything. So
hey, I thought you were transferring them across the internet.
Yeah, I just generated a new one.
I can't wait for the third version of this technology.
I know.
Amazing.
So, so I think that's it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's been a lot of fun talking to you. There's loads of information out there on EF Core 5 for everybody to go find. File your bugs. Let us know what doesn't work, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks with another one of these. I think not quite the same. We're not sure what we're going to do yet, but we'll cover some great EF Core stuff. So, bye everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.